Good morning. Good morning. It looks like we're live. Hello and welcome. My name's Ruth Genoway, and we're back at Edible York, and we're looking at planting on some of our tomatoes. And so far, they're growing pretty well, but they're in small pots at the moment. And you might also have some cucumbers, again, still been in small pots because I've been keeping them indoors to keep them nice and safe out of the way of the frosts. And I've also got a couple of smaller red peppers that I planted relatively late on, and they're growing okay, but yeah, obviously two of them in one pot. They're going to need their own space so that they can grow nice and big. So potting on some things, but also we'll talk a little bit about co-planting, so companion planting. And this is often used by organic growers to help combat some of the pests. So with tomatoes and particularly things like peppers and aubergines and things, sometimes you get green fly or white fly, and we've got some options for helping us combat those pests to kind of deter them from coming in and invading. So we can use marigolds, or you can use some of the slightly aromatic herbs like chives and basil and things like that. So we've got a few things coming up, but I'm going to start off with my tomatoes. And these have been growing quite well. We set them off at the beginning of lockdown on our second planting day, I believe. So I've got an LD tomato and a sun gold tomato here that I want to pot on into a larger pot. What you'll probably want is a fair size pot. This one says it's a 30 centimetre pot, and that's probably about your minimum for tomatoes. You can also, of course, plant them on in grow bags. That's fine, but whichever way you do it, you want to have some drainage, and you probably want to have a saucer to allow you to water it from the bottom. So you can water a bit from the top, and in grow bags, that's pretty much what you're going to be doing. But if you've got a saucer, if the tomato ever gets dried out, the water often flows straight through. And it's good to have it sat in water so that the water can be drawn up into the compost, into the soil from there. It also allows you to give it a really good water if it's going to be a hot day and you're out at work or whatever. So a largish pot and something to put it in that's going to catch any excess water. So we're going to have a look at potting these on, but one thing I do want to mention is I noticed with this pot that it's because it's a brand new pot, they make them and they don't necessarily put holes in the bottom. Now that's great if you've got another pot going inside this and you're just using this to look pretty. This can be the saucer for your water. But if you want it to be used for tomatoes directly in here, then you want to make sure that there are some drainage holes in the bottom. So what I tend to do is there's these sort of the triangular bits, and you could just stab a hole in those. But there's also these sticking up pieces, and they've got sort of these indented holes in here. So what this allows you to do is not completely overwhelm your plant with water, but it'll hold a little bit more water in the bottom if you just cut off the tops of these little holes. So what I've done with one of them is just I've snipped the very top of that little prong off, and I can do this with scissors, but I've got some secateurs there, and I can just go and snip off the top And then each of those, you can see there's light showing through those. So they are going to let the water drain away. So if you do have a brand new pot, do check that it does have drainage holes. Then you can sit it in its saucer. And we're all happy to be able to give our tomatoes a good lot of water first thing in the morning or last thing at night. Let them soak up that water, and any excess can go into the saucer, and if it still needs more, it can draw up more water from that drainage saucer. Excellent. So I've got a couple of larger pots here, and I've actually pre-filled these with a mix of compost and soil. I'm just going to lift the camera up slightly so we can see a little bit better. So we've got a pot there, and I've got probably about 2/3 compost and 1/3 soil in there. And I like to do that because the compost itself can get very dry, and the soil kind of helps retain the moisture in there and give it a bit more structure. So I've got some nice peat-free compost in there, and a bit of soil, and that compost is going to give our plants lots of nutrition to start off with. But by the end of the season, you might want to be starting to feed them. So what they tend to say is sort of 5 to 6 weeks of nutrition is actually in the compost that you get, if you get some nice new compost. And then you can start doing the feeding once it's starts setting the fruit for the tomatoes or the cucumbers or whatever. Okay, so I've filled it partially there, and I can take my tomato and I can put it out of its little pot and into there. With tomatoes, you can actually plant it relatively deep. So this one's reasonably strong. It's been set outside, hardening off overnight as well at the moment, because it's sort of 10 degrees out there at night. But over those cold periods, I did bring it in. But I think it's going to be relatively stable weather now. But if these tomato plants are a little bit leggy, a little bit floppy, you can actually plant them reasonably deep. So any depth that you put the stem into the soil, it's going to send out extra roots from there. So don't worry about planting these relatively deep if you've got a slightly floppy tomato. You'll also want, in the end, a stake to actually hold this tomato upright. If it's outside, it might get blown around a little bit. So either string and tie it into something on your wall, or stakes, a bamboo stake, so that you can tie these tomatoes in to give them a little bit of support. Yeah. So I'm just going to take that label out. I'm just going to ease that tomato out of the pot. So I tend to just squeeze the pot a little bit like that, and then just ease that out of the pot. So you can see that this tomato's relatively enthusiastic growing in that pot. It hasn't got all of its roots running round at the bottom, so it's not totally pot bound, but it is kind of ready to go into the larger pot here. So I'm going to make a little bit of a hole in that compost in my pot, and I'm going to pop that in. But I'm also going to go and then fill that up with more compost. So I'm going to take it up another inch or so up the stem of the tomato there. So I'll end up with the compost round about the level of this rim inside my pot. So I've got my tomato in there, press it down reasonably well. We can give it a good water in that new pot, make it feel right at home. and then I can put a bamboo stake in there to actually tie it, just tie it nice and loosely with a bit of string, tie it to the bamboo stake if you're going to put it outside and it might be a little bit windy. Yeah. So another inch or so of compost and soil is going to go into the top of that, and that's that tomato then happy. Okay, so that's our tomatoes, and I can pop this other one up in a similar way. So I've got, again, the compost and soil mix in there. I can make a little bit of a hole so that you can see that's got a bit of a dimple in there. I can take my tomato, squeeze around and just loosen that. So I've got my rooted tomato like that, and then we're just going to put it into that little hole that I've made in the soil. So we've got our tomato, and the soil can then be pushed in around it. There we go. And again, so now that's nice and firm. I'm going to fill that up again with another inch of 5 centimetres, an inch. No, 2.5 centimetres. An inch or 2.5 centimetres of compost and soil mix to just come up that stem a little bit, and then I can put the stake in. If you are putting the stake in, make sure that it's not going to go through the root ball that you've put in there. So avoid that sort of original pot size and put it outside, just in the compost area. Some people put that stake in before so that they know they're not going to hit those roots and upset the tomato a little bit, make it have to regrow some roots. Okay, so I've got 2 tomato plants in place there. The other one I wanted to plant out today was this cucumber. Now this is going crazy. It absolutely loves it out in my potting shed. It's had lots of sunshine and it's starting to put on lots of little baby lots of little baby cucumbers. This one's a little round yellow cucumber, and it's going absolute crazy in here. I've tied it so that it doesn't completely flop around, but look at the size of this pot. Ruth, you're being such a bad mama to this cucumber. So it needs a much larger pot than that to actually produce the cucumbers for me. It's having a go, but it's definitely going to be pot bound in there. So I don't need quite such a big pot if I'm growing cucumbers. I tend to go for sort of that size pot, so a 7-inch or a 20 sort of centimetre size pot. And I'm going to, again, I tend to do a mix of compost and a third of it is soil. And again, I've filled this up and I've watered the compost a little bit. And I'm going to do the same as I did with my tomato. So, got my compost. I'm going to make a bit of a hole in here, the size of the root ball of my pot area, so I can just drop it straight in and I'm not going to damage the roots. So I've kind of made a little hole in that compost area so that I can put that whole pot in there once I've eased it out. I'm going to take the label out at this point and put that in the side there. And again, we're going to have to be kind of careful with this. I've got both the tomato, the cucumber plant and the stake in here, and I'm just squeezing that pot and easing it out. So this one's got quite a few roots. Again, it's not totally root bound at the bottom there. It's still got some compost, but it's definitely going to be happier once it's in that larger amount of soil. So popping it into that hole. I don't tend to bury my cucumbers extra deep, so it's just at the level that the soil was there. And again, I can just top that up with a little bit of soil, make sure that the stake is in that new position, and then maybe I can tie it onto that new stake, or maybe even give it one slightly taller and keep it growing. And now it's got more compost to go at, now it's got more nutrition to access in that compost, then those cucumbers are going to start growing away for me. And I've got both male and female cucumber flowers on there, but I've also got a couple more cucumbers that are going to sit next to it, and then they can pollinate, and I'm hopefully going to get a nice salad with both cucumber and tomato in 3 or 4 weeks with my plants there. So that's my tomatoes and my cucumbers sorted. So the last one to pot on is my red peppers, and again my red peppers, they're going to want to go into a slightly larger pot. I'm actually choosing a medium-sized pot, not a really large pot for these, because I'm going to try and keep them and feed them on my windowsill where it keeps nice and warm. Red peppers in the UK, probably, unless you're really lucky and we get a hot summer, probably aren't going to produce lots of peppers for you outside. But if you've got a greenhouse, or you've got a really nice sunny windowsill, then red peppers can grow away on there. In my potting shed, it gets a fair amount of sunlight because there's one glazed side. So I can put my red peppers either on a sunny windowsill or in that potting shed, and they're going to grow away quite nicely. So I've got not a massive pot, not as big as my tomatoes. They don't grow quite that big. But if you see them growing in somewhere like Italy, then you go, oh, actually they can grow quite large, but they do want the warmth. So both chilies and peppers are the same in that respect. So I'm going to take those out of the original pot, and I've got 2 plants here that I planted in the same little module. So I'm going to need to just tease those apart. Now, I watered this really well before I came on air, so these should just tease apart relatively nicely, but they should keep the compost around the roots. I don't want to disturb the roots too much. I should probably have potted these on into separate modules a little bit earlier, but I've now got my 2 plants separated, and you can see the roots coming out there. And again, I want to go and make a hole into the soil on my pot there, and I'm just going to pop that down into the soil. So mix of compost and soil again. Could just plant these ones up in compost because they're just going to stay inside, and I am going to remember to water these ones every day. And just press that down. Again, give it another water afterwards, keep it really happy, and we can just put that in a saucer on the windowsill, and that will grow away. Now it's got a lot more compost to go at. Again, I've got my other one. It's going to go into that pot, so I'm just going to make a little bit of a hole in my soil there, yeah. And then I can pop this into that hole, and then press the compost around so it's nice and stable inside that pot. So my peppers don't tend to start off with a stake in them, but if they start to be growing very tall, I might actually just put a stake in so that if I move them while I'm wiping the windowsill down, I'm not going to damage it. But at the moment, those are just going to grow away quite nicely on my windowsill. Those are all happy, and they've got loads more room for those roots to expand now. Okay, so what about this idea of co-planting? So I've had a go with my tomatoes and my cucumber and my peppers there. They're planted on. My tomatoes are going to go outside. Same again for if it's an outdoor cucumber. So things like the market more and things do very well outside. I've grown most of the cucumbers are happy if it's a nice warm wall. But particularly with tomatoes, you might want to have a think about some of the co-planting ideas. So the different companion planting is aimed at helping you with different pests. So one that's particularly recommended if you've had problems with whitefly in tomatoes is to plant marigolds around the bottom of your tomato plants. So again, this is a really good idea for if you've got a slightly larger pot, then that's a good idea because then you're sort of helping to feed both the flowers around the bottom, which look really pretty and help combat the whitefly, and also your tomato in there. So you could sprinkle a few of those marigolds. This one's Marigold Bolero, a Tajit's one, and it gives a lovely splash of colour, and you can just sprinkle those round when you pot your tomato on, and then those can grow. You can grow them in a seed tray ahead of time as well. Against green fly, they tend to recommend the herbs. So both chives and the basils, various different sweet basils, are quite good for helping to protect and hide the smell of your tomato so that green flies don't come and infect them. So I've actually got some of the basil that I was planting out a few weeks ago. So with my tomato plants, I'm going to go and grab some of my basil that we were potting on last week, and I'm just going to put some of these little basil seedlings in with my tomato, and they both like the same sort of conditions, so this is really easy. And who doesn't like a little bit of basil and tomato salad in the summer when it's really hot? So this is nice because you've got both of the two things growing in one place, and you can just go and pick yourself some tomatoes, pick yourself some basil at the same time, and you're away. You've got your lunch sorted. Just need a bit of mozzarella to go with it. So I'm just going to plant these around the edge. So I'm taking my little seedling like that, and just making a little dimple in the soil there and pushing those roots in. And remember, I'm going to be topping this up, so I don't have to plant them very deeply. I'm just putting a few of those basil plants around the edge there. So I'll probably go just for 3 or 4, and then I can top the soil up around those. So I've got my tomato in the middle there, and I've got a little bit of companion planting there to help try and protect from the green fly. So that's one idea for your companion planting. The chives can also work around the base, and again you can just direct sow them in there and they can start growing away, or you could have planted some chives in previous weeks. So a couple of weeks ago we planted some spring onion, and those are growing away quite nicely now. And I've also got the start of my chives there. So if you want to, you can just take some of these chives that we planted a couple of weeks ago, put it on with your tomatoes when you're potting those out into your grow bag or into your big pot, and put them outside, and the chives and the spring onion will both be very happy outside now. So those are both going to be a nice idea. The last thing to do today is just to check in with our spinach that we planted last week. So I was talking about spinach and chard, and just to give you a little update, these are our lovely little spinach plants, and that's after just 1 week. So in fact, I think we planted them on Friday last week, so that's after only 6 days. Those have popped up and they're doing really well. So we can leave them another week, couple of weeks, and then we can go and plant those outside or in a tub or whatever, and you can have nice spinach leaves with your lettuce and whatever in your salads over the rest of summer. So that's our bits and bobs from today. Other things you might want to think about planting, if you do have lots of space outside, then now's the perfect time to be planting things like sweet corn and the last of the pumpkin seeds, things like that. I tend to put sweet corn and pumpkin in the same bed, in a raised bed or an allotment. You tend to want to have a block of sweet corn if you're going to do that. So you want at least a sort of 6 sweet corn plants together, because they air fertilize each other. So the pollen will blow from one to another, and you'll only get the actual corn on the cobs if the flowers have been fertilized. So you do want a block of sweet corn, so they do take quite a lot of space up. So you can start planting out your sort of pumpkins and winter squashes and your sweet corn if you've got a bit more space. Otherwise, get planting some herbs. They're great. You can grow them on the windowsill. If you planted lettuce early on, sort of 8 weeks ago, 7 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, now's a great time to get another set of lettuce or rocket or spinach or radish in, so that you're keeping on your salads throughout summer. As you start finishing off that first lot of lettuce, you've got another lot to come through. Cool. So hopefully that's useful. Hope you get a chance to put your tomatoes out in the next week, and they get to enjoy all of this sunshine. And do give us a shout on the Edible York page or on the comments just below this if you have got any questions that we can help with, or if you'd like to share your posts and share your pictures. We've got the sort of shares and swaps and advice site at York Edible Exchange. So you can go and exchange advice, and if you've ended up with too many tomato plants, you can exchange tomato plants for something else on that site as well. So hopefully that was useful, and hope all your tomatoes and cucumber plants are doing well, and look forward to some crops coming up through the summer. I'm afraid this is going to be one of my last Facebook Lives, because I'm likely to be back at work again for the next few weeks. But one of the other trustees is going to be doing a couple of posts. We've got a post on compost coming up. We've got some other posts about some kids projects if they're not back at school yet over the next week, then we've got a couple of videos coming up there for some projects. So hopefully you can catch up with those. But this may be our last Facebook Live for a little while. So thanks a lot for joining us over the lockdown weeks, and I look forward to seeing some of your pictures on York Edible Exchange. Thanks very much. Bye.